And the child is the one who has to live with those decisions for the rest of their lives. The child is directing the treatment. And we've already established children cannot make those kinds of decisions. So when you have a child telling people, this is what I want and this is what I need, as parents and as medical professionals, we need to step in and say, you're still a child. There are other things we can do. There are other options that we can take to work on the issues that you're facing.
And so in the case, so it from the testimony that I heard, it sounds like there is kind of an arduous process from when a child says, this is what I want, to getting any kind of significant medical intervention in terms of hormone treatment or surgery.
And that's part of it, is stretching that process out so those hormones and those surgeries don't start until they're adults, because that gives them time to really work through all the other problems that they're having.
And so my question is then, what happens then if that family and that doctor and that child have worked through that process and they have come to an agreement about what the appropriate care is for that child, and it would be hormone therapy or it would be surgery, and that child is not 19? And why do we need to then say, sorry, you have to wait?
For the same reason we say kids have to be in seatbelts, for the same reason we say kids can't drink alcohol, kids can't smoke cigarettes, can't buy drugs. We step in because there are guidelines that need to be established, and this is one of them.
But I guess my question is, who is best suited to establish guidelines as related to medical care? Is it senators or is it doctors?
I think that senators are responsible for looking at what's going on around the world. And Florida their medical board has evaluated all of this and said the same thing. No gender surgeries, no puberty blockers, no hormones. Other states are stepping in and saying, hey, we're paying attention to what's going on around the world when people say that this was really, really bad. And when we have suicide rates 19 times greater for people as they've gone through this process, they've finished all the surgeries, they've gotten done, they've healed, and it can be a 7 to 10 year process to go through all of this. And then even after that, 19 times greater chance of suicide.
Okay, I'll let somebody.
Senator Gamble.
Thank you, Senator Kauth. I have been making notes throughout the hearing, but I did want to ask a question in response to this exchange that you just had. And I don't mean this as a flippant question. I really do mean this, but we allow circumcision of infants, and that is not reversible. And that is literally taking off a part of your genitalia.
That is something that's come up quite a few times. We don't allow female genital mutilation.
Actually, that is not actually outlawed in Nebraska, because I've looked at bringing a bill about it.
Say that again?
That is actually not outlawed in Nebraska, because I've looked at bringing a bill about it.
Okay, very good.
But it's not a common practice.
Right.
But circumcision is a common practice.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like we are gendering what medical procedures we're allowing and what medical procedures we're not allowing for children. And personally, in my family, my husband and I, we talked about what we were going to do when we knew we were having a son and whether or not we were going to circumcise him or not. But that was our choice as to what we decided to do with our son. And I've never heard of anyone thinking that it was their right or their position as a legislator to get involved in that. And so.
But with that kind of procedure, there are not lifelong.
There are lifelong
medical complications.
There can be,
but it's not likely.
Well, I mean, based on the decision that my husband and I made, and I didn't get his permission or my son's permission to disclose what decision we made, but based on the decision that we made it looking at medical evidence and based on our concerns of outcomes in either direction. And so there can be very serious outcomes, whether you do it or whether you don't do it, but we still don't legislate that for parents. We allow parents to make that decision with their medical provider. And we made it with our pediatrician's guidance. So I guess I don't I don't see, as a parent, I don't see the difference between you telling me that I can't make these decisions with my medical provider and my child as I did when I decided whether or not to circumcise.
I believe it's the scope. The scope of this is so much more severe.
That brings me to another question.
Okay.
Scope. When we change the scope of any medical practice, what is best practice in this state is to go through what is a credentialing review scope of practice through the Department of Health and Human Services and the Board of Health. This has not gone through any of that, which means it has not been vetted by our medical Board of Health. We don't know all of the risks and implications of such a legislation. Is there a reason that you decided not to do that? Or perhaps sometimes a bill is introduced with the intention of going through the scope process to then be reintroduced at a later date after it's gone through the scope process.
Didn't know we needed one. So it's just.
They're
a
the
matter-
worst.
Thank you.
No, scopes of practice are the worst is what I mean.
So, and that
yeah.
is, you know,
Just for committee hearings wise.
didn't know we needed one, so we'll have to look at doing that, whether or not it's necessary.
Okay.
Thank you for that heads up.
Yeah, they're really, we love them. We love scope of practice bills in the legislature.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Plead the fifth.
I have more questions.
Ben's gonna have a heart attack.
Any other questions? Just making sure Senator Daly.
I promise I won't keep us here too long. The other thing that I'm concerned about that I did hear was, I did look at the Arkansas bill that a few people on both sides referred to, and the language in these bills is very similar.
Mhm.
And Arkansas is currently having to deal with the
they're
legal
litigating,
challenges
correct.
to that we know taxpayers will end up paying for. Do you think it's good practice to put a bill into place knowing that there will be legal challenges that taxpayers are going to have to foot the bill for?
I think that there are things worth fighting for, and this is one of them.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Okay, so to my long list of questions, we heard from a lot of medical experts in the state, and one of the overarching themes that I heard, and is a concern for me as well, is that we are asking, if we as a legislature were to pass this, we are asking our medical professionals to choose. I believe one person said between practicing ethically or being within professional code of conduct. And that seems problematic to me, that we are asking, and I guess I would like to give you the opportunity to speak to, because that is a national code of ethics that we are asking them to violate.
Well, and as far as which national code of ethics?
I mean, by not allowing them to refer, not allowing them to practice the scope, not allowing them all of the things on page 6.
And when we're talking about referring, it's referring for specific procedures. So someone could refer a child from, I think I heard someone talk about they're out in Kearney and they want to refer to an Omaha gender clinic. They could still refer them for that affirmative care. It's when you refer for those specific procedures or medications.
But if they refer, the way this is written, I would say that is not clear,
Okay, we can clear that up.
that they cannot refer. And you do have in here that it prohibits puberty blocking drugs.
Mhm.
So it is more than just procedures
Procedures and medications.
and medications. So when I guess I'm really struggling with listening to medical professional after medical professional, people who have practiced this in various forms and settings, when they say that this is not following a standard of care that is well established in this country and internationally, that we would be asking them to break their own code of ethics.
Again, they're looking at the standard of care as we know it now, not as we look at the countries that are backing off and saying, this did not work and this is not good. We need to back down. That is starting to filter through many different countries. We should not be following along in the path and go through every single thing and then realize, oh, hey, we're going to keep following them and stop doing it in 20 or 30 years.
I would say that our healthcare system is very different from other countries.
I would agree.
And so it's not whatever the examples, apples to oranges, all the things we've heard, all the fruit we've heard
It's
today.
not, and that's just it. In those countries, this care was free, it's readily accessible, it was continuous. They had options, multiple doctors. I mean, they had lots more options.
And we
It was
did-
much more accessible. And they still are saying, wait a second, this didn't work. We're seeing very bad outcomes with this.
And we did hear a testifier talk about that specifically, in that they may have implemented it so broadly that it was being utilized not as appropriately. What I heard today was that we have very rigorous processes before anyone can go through surgery, and even through medication, but that also this medication, the puberty blockers specifically.
But when you heard our proponents, you heard Luca testify about how she had her breast removed
Yes,
at UNMC,
and
and
that is,
she had one visit.
that is extremely, extremely unfortunate.
Right.
But based on all of the testimony today, it appears to be an outlier. I'm not saying that it definitely is an
Mhm.
outlier, but it appears to be an outlier. And it to change the entire medical system around gender affirming care for an outlier is not appropriate in my view. And I have very serious concerns about this legislation. And I asked you this question at the start, and I want to revisit it, about the individuals or entities that you worked with. We have a very robust medical community here in Nebraska, and I didn't see that. And maybe I apologize. I tried to ask people the questions as much as I could, but I didn't see that represented in the proponent testimony. I didn't
So
see
all the doctors that showed up,
that they were from the Nebraska medical community.
they were almost all from Nebraska.
Okay,
Kearney, Omaha, Lincoln, Columbus. I mean, they were from throughout Nebraska.
okay. Well, I guess I missed that, but are they people that are practicing therapy? Are they people that are practicing hormone therapy? What kind of surgeries are they practicing? And not only did they testify, but did they help inform how this legislation was written? Because on the
Yes.
alternative side, I hear people, and this is a concern I had reading this by myself. I had concerns over the state funds. I had concerns over the standard of care. And I feel that this is extremely harmful to youth, but also problematic in its implementation. I guess that's not really a question so much as a statement. I apologize for not
It's okay.
asking a question.
I'm writing that one down though.
But we heard a lot from youth today, and I want to honor all sides of the proponents and opponents and their positions on this. But we did hear an extensive amount from youth and from their parents asking us not to do this. And especially when it comes to parents asking us not to get involved in parental medical decisions. I don't know how we get around that. This feels like an enormous overstep in our role as a government into the family unit. And you don't see it that way.
Not in this instance, no.
So to me, as a parent, this tells me that the state doesn't trust me to parent my family.
To me, it tells me that parents are being given information and being given terrible choices. You've heard them talk about you're a dead son or a live daughter, that kind of phraseology. I think parents are being put into really, really bad situations where they don't have a choice to affirm or not affirm, to support whatever transition their
But that
child
feels
needs.
anecdotal.
It does.
It doesn't feel like I'm swimming in research over here. it doesn't feel like this is based in something. And I don't normally ask questions to this degree, but I find that, I mean, we spent this many hours here and I very much appreciate your willingness
Oh, of course.
to have this conversation. But I find it really concerning, and I am very concerned about the youth, and they are watching us and they are hurting. And if we were to move this out of committee, I don't think the message the message you're telling me you're trying to send is not the message that I heard that is being sent. The message I'm hearing is that LGBTQ, specifically trans youth, feel like their state legislature is attacking them.
And that is certainly not the case. We're trying to protect them. And when you talk about the studies that are done, you had several of the opponents testifying that you can't do a randomized controlled trial because it would be so harmful to not give the placebo group a placebo.
Right.
But we have no absolute proof. There's no evidence that this care, that these puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and surgeries actually affect the gender dysphoria. We don't know for sure. So when you look at those studies, they're weak and poorly designed, and they cannot be held to the same standard as a randomized controlled trial.
I would push back on that they're weak and poorly designed. It sounded like just with diabetes, as was used as example, that would be to say that the studies around diabetes are weak and poorly designed. I think that they're not designed to this in the same way, but I take your point very much and I appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely.
Senator Day.
Okay, so
Getting a
the
big
other
one.
concern that was brought up by some attorneys around the issue would be if we were to pass this bill, we would be out of compliance with federal law. And so potentially losing funding for Medicaid.
So none of the attorneys that I've run this by thought that that was a problem, and I've taken it through several different variations and several different attorneys. I can certainly check back with them and ask them that specifically, but it was never brought up as being an issue.
Okay. And then the other, I was looking at, we've talked about Sweden a lot today. And I was just looking at their most recent February 2022 update, Swedish National Board of Health and Welfare, related to gender dysphoria. It appears that in Sweden, the minimum age for puberty blockers is, the suggested minimum is the age of 12. The minimum age for cross-sex hormones, estrogen.
Are you looking at the
testosterone.
Karolinska?
I'm sorry.
Is it the Karolinska?
No, this is just from the Swedish National Board of Health.
Okay, so I'll get you the Karolinska.
And the minimum age for cross-sex hormones is 16. So this bill would be even more restricted than, even if they are pulling back, like you said, which sounds like is the case, they're still allowing for the possibility that there are some kids that would need puberty
I'll get you
blockers.
my citation.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
All right, any more questions? I have, maybe not a question, but more comment. I think Senator Kauth made a point about the 407 process, but I believe that's when we're increasing the scope of practice.
It's any change.
Is it any change, even getting rid of something? Okay. All right, and one more thing. Do we have, out of the states that have passed legislation such as this, do we have any data yet from those states? I know it's pretty early.
Very, very early.
Okay, just making sure. Okay, good. Well, seeing no more questions.
Can I have,
Oh, Senator Reed, yep.
do you have any access to what Sweden and the other, what they're doing? I'm trying to say, are we just behind the tail there, the curve? I mean, if there's, I'd be interested out of curiosity.
I liked the idea of
where
the
they were
interim
at and
study
why they're
going to
changing.
Sweden.
I'm just putting a note to my AA to try to just to do a Google search to see what I can find too.
I'll send you some stuff over.
I just want to see, to me, that's a bigger picture. Sam. Not that we do what they do, but it's interesting. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Senator
I
Day.
promise this is the last one. You mentioned the interim study, and that was a question I wanted to ask.
The which one?
The interim study,
Yeah.
we had a social worker that mentioned, would you be willing to hold on to this bill so we could do an interim study and get a better picture related to research and treatments and those types of things?
I'll certainly give it consideration.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Senator Ballard, you good?
I am. Gotta let my dog out at some point, so.
I know, your poor dog.
Oh, thank you guys all
Yep.
for staying and working through all of this. I appreciate it.
And I
Thank you.
I do appreciate all the people who did come to testify, even the ones who weren't able to get heard. But I thought it would just be right to be fair to both sides
Absolutely.
if we gave both sides the right treatment. So with that, there were some letters to the record. I want to make sure we get this on record too. There was 925 letters as opposed to this bill and 578 as proponents of the bill and 3 neutral. So with that, this will end the hearing for LB 574
Thank you very
and
much.
end the hearing for the day.